Welcome to the channel. Today, I don't know how much I'll get done today. It's raining outside. I've been working all day on my car, finished it up, and I got it pulled out. Been dealing with the rental, but my car is off the rack outside. But my son's car, I guess the clutch is slipping. So I guess the next goal now is pull a W55 or 58 transmission on a 2J IS300 manual car. Here we go, let's get to it. Alright, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the drive shaft from the tailpiece. The drive shaft from here, it is two-piece and there is some bolts up toward the front we'll have to take out. So that should be joules over to get them. Sometimes you can get them loose, the first one, without having to use a hold back wrench like that one come off. And I will have to roll it over to get that one out. I have to get that last one loose and that assembly will move a little bit. But I'll take a, you can go with me and you'll see what I'm doing. Alright, so what you'll do is get you a 7/8 socket, put it on a ratchet, and on the 2Js, the nut actually sticks out a little further. Let me get some light on the subject. The actual nut sticks out a little further, if you can see it. Right there. So you can put a wrench on these, but I just do the 7/8. And so you watch down at the other end. All right, so you can see light through that hole right there, possibly in the camera, it's hard to tell. All right, so we're looking for that light right there. So watch that. So I'm actually just cranking the engine over to get the drive shaft to turn because it's in gear. If you leave it out of gear, you can turn it, but when you go to take those loose, it wants to spin on you, which you can. And so, a little more. And so what that done was give us our two bolts that are left on the bottom. So the ones here that had the issue where it wouldn't come off, and the other one's right here. So that way we can work on them right here without having to do anything else with the drive shaft. So that'll be done. The drive shaft will be ready to finish taking out once we take those two out. All right, so we continue on. Get our little wrenches here. And make sure you're going the right way, because that does make things a lot more difficult if you're spinning everything the wrong way. So and either side of this will turn. One side's the bolt and the other side's the nut. So whichever one's more convenient for you to get a hold of. And that's that one. So a lot of times, most of the time this thing won't fall or anything. You just be careful that it might if it's been out recently. Sometimes they end up with the, you gotta just give it a little jiggle. And that made that one fall, loosen up. So that's 4. So there's 4 bolts in that. All the bolts on the rear part of the drive shaft, they were 14s, the head and the nut on them. So just so you know, they were all 14s. And again, you could have taken it loose here from this short drive shaft. But what I'm going to choose to do is take up here 9/16 is equivalent to a 14, so these will be 14 as well. And just so you know, it's not exactly the same, but it's, you know, if you got a 9/16 laying there and don't have a 14, it generally will work. You can see these things are fairly tight up there. And I'm going to back the camera off a little bit because this is when they'll tend to try to come down. And always make sure you know where your flying pieces went. So, one thing I didn't do, when you pull this down, that end will start pulling out. That's a slip joint, so that'll actually pull out, and that's made to go in or out as the rear diff moves up and down. So, what I didn't do is I put a drain pan. I've got it's a regular old drain pan, and I'll put it down at the tail shaft, the tailpiece of that. So that thing will actually try to lose fluid on you. So, and sometimes you got to take some kind of pinch bar or something, and you have to try to persuade this to let go. And then again, when you get on that side, you may see some fluid loss. If you do, that's okay, that's normal. If you don't, you definitely want to check your fluid level. Let the car down, take the gear shifter loose, and when I do that, I will actually, those bolts that are holding the bottom right here, we'll let those down, but I gotta go up, make sure my gear shifter is turned loose, and make sure that I don't try to pull the shifter through or anything. So let's go do that, and then we'll come back down here once we get that done. All right, here we go. Okay, so the only thing I did was take the shift knob off because I don't think I have to take anything else off because it's got the e-brake, the hydro e-brake plate, and all that stuff, but I think all that was just for mounting the top plate and the cover and all that. So I think the shifter itself will actually pull through the boot. So I'm going to let it down, and if I can see that it's going to do that and it's not attached in no form or fashion, which I don't think it is, I'll let a little slack in the actual bracket here. And if I see that it's going to just pull right through the boot, then we'll be good. But I don't think it's attached to anything on top. That way I don't have to pull all the handbrake and all the plate and all that stuff apart. Which I may do it anyway, just to paint it while we got it down. But keep in mind, when this tail comes down to this transmission, that fluid's going to come rolling out of there. So have you, if you hadn't got a drain pan by now, you definitely need to grab one, because it'll be here in just a second. When that end starts coming down, that fluid will absolutely start coming out of there. This is, you never know if all the bolts accidentally come too far and you end up with transmission in your lap. So, with the transmission jack, it makes things so much easier. We may end up having to pull the exhaust. I don't know just yet, but we'll see. And that's just to take some of the pressure off of if it goes too far. You know what I mean? This is not any kind of technical anything. This is just, I don't want it to just go too far and all of a sudden I've got, it drops. And because if a wire gets tight or anything up front and I've not noticed it, if a bolt comes out, it's too late, it's pulling stuff apart. So we'll check this, we'll get them started, see if our shifter, yep, 14s. I don't know why I took that one all the way out. And you want at least 2 threads is the ideal. And then you'll have some fluid coming down. All right. Yeah, I believe we'll just pull through the boot right there is all that'll happen. So we're gonna go ahead and take them all out and let it sit on the transmission jack. Woo. See, when it drops, it drops. I need to go up a little on the transmission jack. Take some of that tension off. So, always watch your hands, because anything like that can change. Anything can move. Don't get your, it's called pinch points, but don't get your hands in a pinch point. So, start letting her down a little bit, the tail of it, so you can work. Alright. It obviously don't give you much room. Some of these will give you a ton of room once they start coming down. Like the, what you call it, the 240. I mean, the motor completely just laid down, but that could be in the exhaust. I bet it is. We may have to at least break that joint. Yeah, I think that's what's holding us up. I'll put some tension back on it, and we'll pull this section of the exhaust here just so the motor can tilt more. Alright, so I got the 3 exhaust bolts out. One thing I'll say is if you take your exhaust loose, try to keep those bolts separate from all the rest of your bolts, because you have a lot of heat, a lot of tension and stuff in those, so that way you're not dealing with stretch bolts or bolts that are gauted up, because you end up those things end up stripping, end up getting, you know, just all jacked up. So you don't want to I think it's in the motor mount, so we'll check it. But you don't want to get your exhaust bolts mixed up, because those tend to be a lot more rougher shape than what all your other bolts end up being, and you don't want to put one of those in, you know, a different location that you don't want to get fouled up or stripped or, you know, galled up real bad. So we'll start looking at grounds. We'll start looking at a bunch of different things. Our clutch line and everything will start coming into play now, now that we can see some of it, and we will start cutting some of that stuff loose. Okay, so on the driver's side, what I do see so far is the slave cylinder here. There's 2 bolts. They look to be like a 12, and then there's a ground wire up here that goes up to the right underneath here. So we'll gather a 12 up, and that ground's probably a 14, and we'll try to get those removed. Alright, so we got us a 12 socket, and you can go right over top of the line. Nothing's in the way. I think you can see there. And these aren't super tight, and you can just get right to both of them, no issues. Once you get them broke loose, a lot of the bolts, if you put the socket back on them, a lot of times you can just turn the socket if you don't have a lot of room to ratchet, but you can still get your socket in there. This bracket, that actually holds that slave on, so you want to pull it off too, because I'd say that goes into your bottom of your transmission. So, but you'll notice it, there's tension right there. It's nothing crazy, but that line where it's got that on it. Alright, so we got the 14. We'll go ahead and turn this jewel loose. You'll make sure it's on there square. It's kind of rounded off. That might be my socket. I think it's my socket. Yeah, let me get a different socket. My socket's jacked up on the end. Yeah, that socket's had a rough life. Alright, so now and as long as that bolt is, I guarantee you that goes into the transmission itself. So that's loose. I think I'm actually going to pull the ground wire loose from here and just tuck it up with it, because I think that will be the easiest route. And if I can, try to put my bolts back in where they live, if I can. And the reason I do that is if it's a day or two before I get to this, there's not as many bolts to sift through. So Come on now. And I've had people ask me how come I don't use gloves. I have no clue. I've just never used them. I don't have any preference one way or the other. I hadn't ever. It's been a habit. I don't have a clue. But yeah, that's the 12. I hadn't swapped it yet. So we'll go back to, looks like a 10. I think it's a 10. Yeah, so we'll pull this 10 and we will get the ground loose from here. Pull the 10. And to me, there's just, I have preferences and it don't really matter. But that, I feel like, will be easier for me to find when I go back with this whole setup. Because sometimes you forget grounds and little things. I just think that will be easier for me to locate and be able to put back where it belongs. And that type of thing. So we'll go to the other side. We'll kind of assess that, see if there's anything we need to remove. I see the starter bolts from here. I believe we'll get the transmission down a little bit more. I think we'll be able to get to the starter bolts. We just got to see what kind of give we got. Now, right above where the camera is actually sitting, I'll show you. What I will do sometimes, inside this hole here is the motor mount bolts. On some, I will actually back the nut. It's just a nut in there. I will actually back the nut loose, and that way the mount can go a little higher if I need just a little more slack. But we'll move everything and we'll see what we do have. And we'll check the other side for any kind of wires, anything tight, and then we'll go from there. Just like I thought, from the other side where the ground was to this side, there's a bolt in the exact same location. So that ends up being, I think it's a 14. That ends up being bell housing bolts that go, instead of going this way, they go that way. And they've just used that as a ground. It wasn't specifically as a ground. It was a bell housing bolt. So that bolt had a purpose. So it wasn't just an existing bolt. And that's the one that had not the ground, but the bracket. So it was a bolt with a purpose. Wasn't just one shoved in there for that bracket. So it's the exact same style bolt, same size. Okay. Not seeing anything standing out that I need to be concerned with as far as any kind of movement just yet. I'll go ahead and pull the ratchet and socket off the crank pulley. That way it doesn't fall or I forget and do something silly. Because on Hondas, I'm bad about leaving it in there after I set the timing. So I'm gonna let the jack down, see if I can gain some, and see if I can kind of follow the wiring up and make sure I'm not pulling something as far as wiring, pulling it apart. Okay, so in pulling the plug from the other side across the top of the transmission, I end up encountering another plug on this side. And it's a little 2-wire deal. See if I can get him to let go. So that's on this side. So that brings this plug over to here. And you have to remember to put that one back across there because this one actually plugs up on the other side, and once you push this transmission up you won't have that kind of room. But I was actually getting my strap ready to hang across the transmission and I ran into it, so that was one I hadn't seen. But yeah. Okay, so looking at the tail end of the transmission, straight up here, there's 10mm bolts. There's 4 of them. And that's the actual shifter piece. They're little bitty guys. Hindsight, I may have been better pulling the console and getting to these because so far they're a pain. Okay, so I ended up having a 1/4-inch drive, 10mm. I found it. It's a short, stubby one, and I got it up here, and I was able to break off the plate here. I'm still not 100% certain this is the fix. I think so. Okay. Alright, so we're okay. So our shifter comes out in one whole piece. That's what you get. We can put it back in the top, I think. But this is what you're working with when it comes out. Should be fairly easy to put back in. Let me tell you, if you ain't got one of these bad boys here now, and you do mechanic work, what this is, it's 3/4 or a 1/2 inch on this side and 3/8 on this side, which I had to adapt it back up to a 1/2 inch because it's 17. And it's, I guess, 3 feet long. This is the answer to bell housing bolts on these jobs. Readjust my light so I can see up in there. So that starter bolt is loose, and it's a 14, so it's a different size. So we got it. It's right there. They're a longer bolt, different style of bolt than your regular bell housing bolts. Just trying to figure out. Oh, I let the starter completely loose. I see what it did. There we go. We'll just pull that. There's the other one. And so you can see how the starter works on these things. It's right there. Behind that bar, but right there is the starter. So it's loose. Those 2 bolts got it. And now we'll be hunting the rest of the bell housing bolts. And there's 2 on the bottom. I need to get those. They're 14s as well. So these are right here on the bottom where you're looking. Let's get our breaker bar here. These are super tight as well, which I could probably get them from up there. Those ain't all that, but I'm here, I have the tools in my hand. Yeah, I guess it did break. We'll go to the other side, and we'll get the other one. And we'll move on from those. Alright, so there's generally one on the very, very top. I can't see it enough to get a light to it and show you, but I'm gonna try to find it and get it broke loose and get it backed out. I just don't think I'll be able to put the camera on it and stuff, but let me see if I can't get those loose, get some light on them, figure out where they're at, and we'll try to get those off, and then we'll go from there. We'll be ready to pull this transmission in a minute. Alright, so I'm pretty confident I got the top 2 bolts out. Let's see if this jewel will shimmy out of here. That's a good start. Good thing we had our pan. Alright, so what's happening is we're hitting the back of the body of the car right there. And this one leg's right in the way of the drain pan, so I'm getting it everywhere. So when you hear it not hitting in the drain pan, it's hitting on the floor. There, maybe that'll fix us. Transmission fluid's pretty nasty. Make sure we're not hooked on nothing. I don't think we are. I think it's just the exhaust, you guys. That's all that's got us is the header, just the side of the header there. Go. And that's our 2JZ W55, I guess it is, removal. That's a vent for your transmission on the bottom. There's your transmission. I had everything loose. What it was doing was getting hung on this ear right here on the, if I can get you up here, on the exhaust right here. It was getting hung on that ear right there. So I just had to get it past that. So, yeah, that's it. All right, so we're ready to disassemble the clutch and all that and move on. All right, here we go. All right, so this side of it here is actually pretty simple. It's 12 millimeters. And you just take them all loose. Get rid of these because sometimes they will fall. You can tell this clutch has been through it. Take this part off. And so there's our fluid out of that transmission. It's pretty brown and nasty looking. Can't make up my mind. It's got like a purple tint to it, so at one time it might have been royal purple. I don't think so. More of a brown, dingy, not been changed in a while, but it seemed like it might have had a purple tint. It's hard to tell. But we'll drain that. We'll let that drain overnight. I will get on out of here, and I think I'm gonna call it a night. We'll come back either tomorrow or Sunday, finish pulling all this clutch and stuff off, cleaning the transmission up. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the clutch off. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. That way I got it. All right, here we go. Let's make a decision. All right, so what we're looking at here is, you can see the discoloration in that. That's from the heat. The heat tends to make, you know, different colors and, you know, like hot spots, and that's slick, you know. It's got some places where it's, you know, it's been way too hot. All right, so your disc, you're looking at the rivet. It's almost touching. If you can, that rivet's almost flush with the plate itself. Outside, you can see it's more on the outside edge, and it's just slick where this clutch has been so hot, and the buttons are almost flush with the face. So it was definitely on its way out. Yeah, so let's do a clutch. But all right, clutch is out. That's a removal of a clutch on a 2JZ IS300. All in all, which filming it definitely takes longer. I have to reposition lights, and I'm nasty, so I try not to get, the camera stand's pretty nasty, but I try not to get it all over no more than I have to. I can always clean up, you know, wipe my hands and stuff. But I generally, by the time I'm done with the job, I'm covered in grease and everything. I don't slow down until I get to, you know, I took this out before I took a break or stopped or washed my hands or anything. I washed it 2 or 3 times and readjusted lights and stuff. My phone's dead, so I don't have a clue what time it is. I would imagine 7:30 maybe. So a couple hours, 8 o'clock at the most, and I started like close to 6, I believe I said. I think it's 5:20 something, and I hadn't really started, I don't think, at that point. So a couple hours, and that's filming and, you know, taking a break to move everything around. And I lost my 17mm socket. I about stopped because I couldn't find it, and I broke the other one. But I ended up finding it. It was actually way over there somewhere under a seat. So, it's out. And the good thing about having the transmission jack is I can turn it at that angle, and I can drain that jewel, get all the old stuff out without having to, you know, really disassemble anything. So I'll take the throwout bearing out of it, pressure wash it, and I won't do it at that angle. I'll stand it flat and cover the holes and stuff and put some degreaser on it and let it soak for a while, and then I'll come back and actually wash it down. So but that at least lets it, you know, drain overnight and try to get all the nastiness down on one end. I did hear some clumps of stuff hit down in there. I didn't see it, but I heard some, you know, like you can tell something fell out versus just the liquid. Not sure what it is. Could be just some bearing material. It might not be anything bad. It might be a tooth off one of the gears that we may not ever notice. And it may be, like I say, a bearing, and if it's a bearing, it's bad. But we'll know pretty soon if it's a bearing. But like I say, I think this transmission and this motor is probably on their way out. We've been really rough on them. But that's my first 2JZ motor that I've taken out. So you experienced it with me. That was my very first 2JZ removal. And the other one on the 240 is my first KA. I've never took a KA out. So, and if you've seen the footage with the 350Z, I never took a 350Z out. I was a Honda fanatic, you know, so I took a ton of Honda stuff out. But moved into the rear wheel drive stuff, and that's where I'm at with it. I've done a lot of that now. So it's not that bad, actually. This one was a little harder. Well, it's a lot harder than the KA. I'll go ahead and tell you that the 2J was a lot harder than the KA, but still not insane. So if it's 2 people doing it, hour, really. I mean, realistically, an hour. 2 people, somebody handing bolts, you know, unplugging stuff, hour, 30 minutes, maybe 45, some of that nature. So, you know, with a lift and jacks, you know, under the car, realistically a couple hours if you know, you don't have some of the tools that I do have. And I still don't have the best tools, but I'm telling you, that long extension, the 1/2 by 3/8, I think it's like 3 foot long, but it's 1/2 inch on one side and 3/8 on the other. That is the lifesaver. But what I end up doing is, because the impact sockets and, you know, with the tightness of the bell housing bolts, I end up going back, they call it reducing, even though you're going up, but reducing back up to a 1/2 inch, or growing back up. From a 3/8, I go back up to a 1/2 inch socket on the other end usually, unless it's a, you know, 14 or 12 or something, a starter bolt or something. But all right, thanks for watching our video. I'm not sure if I'll do it in a single part or a dual part video. I don't know, you know, how the footage is going to drag on. I don't want to bore you with all of it. And if I separate it, you can watch the going back in, and you don't have to watch the taking it out part. So that I may do that, and that'd be your call whether you want to watch one part versus the other, or it doesn't put so much footage that you're having to fish through it to, you know, if there's something you missed or I didn't show. And again, it's one of them where it's new to me. I might have missed something that I didn't film. If you got any questions or concerns or an easier way to do some of this, I believe if I had to do it over, I would have pulled the plate off the top with the e-brake and all that, because it's only 4 bolts. Could have pulled that top. I might have exposed the top of that shifter a little better. I might go back in that way. But you definitely have to take that shifter off to get that transmission. This one don't lean enough to pull that shifter through the top and to scoot it back enough. It just doesn't come down enough. And that may unscrew from that piece. If it unscrews from that piece, even better. But the way I did it, that's, I don't know, that's just the way it happened. But yeah, all right, I'm gonna clean up, gather up my stuff, put all this stuff in something so I can take it and get it swapped out tomorrow, maybe. And we'll see what happens from there. All right, here we go. Hey, thanks for watching our video, by the way, guys. Thanks, we appreciate it. All right, here we go.
I'm feeling high. high.